Welcome to the Salience podcast, where we identify what stands out from all the noise.
Today on the Salience podcast, we explore health systems and the idea of synergy. I'm especially interested in the challenges faced by health system leaders, reconciling seemingly endless need for more investment, and the vexed question of how to conduct business as usual and change simultaneously. Our guest today is Helena Harnik, co-founder and program executive director at the Synergist. Despite sounding like the evil villain in a Netflix drama, the Synergist is an incubator who brings together complementary stakeholders to focus on and benefit from solving societal issues. Helena has worked with the Synergist since its founding, after experience in several large companies. Helena has an international MBA from Lyon in France and a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from Williams College in the United States. Welcome, Helena.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Okay, so before we explore how synergy can solve societal problems, so not a small topic, I'd like to know a little bit more about your own journey before you got involved in systemic work of the sort the Synergist specializes in.
Happy to explain, Ian. So thank you so much for having me here today. So my background is international. I'm a Japanese American and I've grown up in some different countries. You've mentioned some of them. I grew up in Japan, London, the US, and that explains a bit of the transatlantic accent that I have. So after college, I was working for a company called Gerson Group. It's an expert network. And what we were doing was trying to answer business questions. We were working a lot with investment professionals. So those of the people who would be doing due diligence before they make investments, working with private equity companies, even lawyers looking for expert witnesses. And they would have very specific questions seeking to understand something in depth, like the shipping industry. But rather than just connecting them with a consultant who knows about the topic, the idea was to find them all kinds of people. We called this the mosaic research approach, all kinds of people who could inform them about that topic. So if it's about the shipping industry, not just the consultant, but it could be the captain who's driving the ship. It could be the person who is managing the offloading and onboarding of cargo, all these different kinds of things together. And towards the end of my time there, I had the opportunity to work on some exciting projects, which is really doing the same, but for not-for-profit types of questions and societal questions. So for example, there was one project I was working on, and we were actually working in the area of vaccines, things like vaccine development, vaccine distribution. And I just loved that idea of what happens when you are bringing these different people together. And I was realizing that when you have a societal issue, if you take an issue like vaccines distribution, how amazing would it be to tap into the network that we had and not just bringing together the head of vaccine distribution for UNICEF, but let's say you brought them together in the same room together with the head of logistics for FedEx or for Coca-Cola. I mean, they can get this kind of thing anywhere in the world and maintain a cold chain. So wouldn't that be amazing? And I remember we did this and we had this meeting where we brought these people together. And these people were surprised. I think they were surprised that they had anything to share. I mean, you can imagine if you're from a company like FedEx or Coca-Cola, what do you have to convey and to share with the health system? But I realized that it was really amazing for them to feel like they could contribute, and there was genuinely a lot of insights that they could share. And so this really planted a seed for me in terms of understanding, first of all, this desire to work on societal issues, but also what happens when you bring these diverse perspectives together. After that, I did my MBA. And after my MBA, and this was when I was in France, I had the opportunity to work with Sanofi Pasteur. So this is a vaccines company, and I was working in the vaccine policy and advocacy department. And through the course of the work, I had the opportunity of meeting with Nicolas Brook, who is now my business partner with the Synergist. And together we worked for a while, and this was actually the very beginning of the Synergist. I was actually working with the Synergist as almost a provider at the beginning. I was working for, later after my time at Sanofi Pasteur, I was working for a digital communications consultancy that was also looking at how can you use platforms to bring together different perspectives and helping create kind of balanced understanding of different issues. That was more the way that Nicolas, who is my business partner, got into it. And so I was actually starting to work with the Synergist and supporting with the early programs we have. So we started working in some projects around dengue fever called Break Dengue, and another one in maternal health that's actually more about the safety of medicine use in pregnancy and breastfeeding, which was thought to be, it still is today, a real gap when it comes to safety information. And so that's how it all started. And at some point, I had the opportunity to shift full time and to become a real co-founder. And so that's when their journey really started to begin. But I have to say, when I look at the Synergist today and how we were back then, there was still a steep learning curve in terms of, what it really takes to make synergy. You mentioned the word synergy, but how to make synergy happen. And it's something that we feel doesn't happen by magic, let's say.
Tell me more. I mean, there's lots I want to talk about, this idea of an expert network group and what that means for complexity in systems. But tell me, what do you mean by synergy? And then you say it's not a magic to make it happen. So what is it and how do you make it happen?
That's a great question. So I guess part of synergy, which is important, is the kind of environment, like the conducive environment for collaboration that needs to happen. And this needs to be existing, a trustful environment. I think part of it is when you have a group of people who come together who wish to really make a change and to do it in a positive way. I think genuinely the people we work with are personally invested in making this change happen, like a societal change happen. We can go into all kinds of discussions in theory around shared value and so on. I mean, personally, I believe that there is, shared value is something that's real. Like of course, we know that people come into these kinds of discussions with a kind of ulterior motive. But is it a problem if the ulterior motive, if they converge at some point and there is a joint ambition and the joint ambition is reached? I don't have personally a problem with that. That's my personal view of that. And I think this kind of the mindset that people come with, the trust, the willingness, is part of the synergy. And that's something else I would highlight as well. We work a lot with individuals. Like when we work on these programs, I haven't explained to you yet how it works. We have relationships often with organizations on the surface of it. But at the end of the day, the relationship is with the person who's representing that organization. And I think that's something that's really important. And we often joke, we say we look for synergists outside of the Synergist, so that people who are able to convey and show the qualities that we think are important for synergism to happen is something that's also really important with the way we work. And we're always surprised by where we might find these synergists. I know the first time that we had met, I said, okay, Ian is a synergist all the way in Tasmania. But yeah, we look for these qualities, the ability for people to be able to participate in the trustworthy way, but also for the ability for these people to be open-minded and make connections and the willingness to change systems as well, and to look at issues as a systemic thing, that someone who's able to embrace the complexity.
Yeah, there's a lot that you've said here that really goes to the fundamentals of how do you change complex systems. This idea that synergy is more than the sum of the parts. It's an amplification, and you talked about the importance of relationships, and in this case, particularly with people that represent those organizations. I really like the way you said, you talked about trust. You said something very important. You were sort of plus or minus on the shared values. And in fact, I would use a slightly different term, which is shared intentions. Where there's a really clear shared intention, you can make this work, even if some of the values or some of the ways of doing this might be a bit different. As long as there's that shared intention for the change, for maintaining trust, the willingness that you described, and I think you've got a lot of the right ingredients there for effective collaboration, in this case, a synergistic collaboration.
I think you're right. I think I like the term intentions, shared intentions. I think it's more than shared intentions though as well, because I think that there are somewhat rules of the games that need to be followed. I mean, you could have the right kind of intention, but I think the way that you are following through is important. So, for example, something that I think is really important is the fact that people come with this intention, this willingness to contribute, and then not to take away more from the relationship than they are contributing. I mean, you might be sharing the overall intention of the group together, but if there is an imbalance in the way that you're engaging with the group, then I think you might have an issue. So yes, shared intention, and more than that, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. I really like that important distinction. This comes down to some of the attributes of trust. I've been exploring with various executive teams for quite a while. What is trust? What is trust for you? And I've got a curious definition. For me, trust is about seeing enough repetition in the patterns of behavior that I can predict what's going to happen next. Now, sometimes the pattern of behavior is so chaotic, the only thing you can trust is that they're going to behave chaotically. But that can still give you an operating parameter. It's often not a fun one, but you can at least trust that they're going to be chaotic. Or you can trust that somebody is going to let you down. The pattern is that they're not going to do what they said that they were going to do. They're going to let you down. They're not going to deliver. And then you've got a choice whether you work with them or not. So for me, part of trust is what's the pattern of behavior, and is it the pattern of behavior that I need or I want to work with? And the ideal ones, of course, are people do what they say they're going to do. They've got the shared intention. They've got the willingness, and they're prepared to create that environment of generosity, of sharing, where it's not about what they take and what they can get from it. I think I might have just paraphrased what you said in different words.
I think you're right. I think there's definitely this behavior and being able to kind of trust and anticipate what might comes into it. I think when I talk about trust, or when we talk about trust, there is also a human values component to it. So I think it's important that we can I'll say the word trust, that the person, that they have these kinds of, quote, right values in place. What we do in the Synergist is we are working for the societal issues. So actually our ambition, that's our single-minded ambition. We take a societal goal, like, for example, women-centered care and R&D is something that I'm working on right now. And I'm the guardian of this issue. And yes, I know that people come in from different kinds of angles and different kinds of desires around that topic, but I would need them to feel like a same level of value for that topic. And again, the kind of rules of the game, the balance of what they take in, take away. I think I'm also looking for their willingness to kind of defend this collaboration as well. I think someone who is able to create new possibilities, not kind of trash the relationship. Luckily, this kind of thing hasn't really happened before, but of course, it's always in the back of our mind. And I think having this feeling of trust is so important because, I mean, I think people, they sense when it's not there. And I think it's only because these things are there, then they can be even more honest, really. And often we have these kinds of discussions where it gets a bit dicey. You know, people say really what they think, and not in a bad way, but I think sometimes you just need to get it out. You have to have these discussions. And we believe in, I believe in system change. For system change to happen, you have to have all the kind of the different stakeholders around the table who have an opinion. And sometimes I think you need the space to figure things out. And if you don't figure it out, then it gets stuck there. And so here we're diverging a bit from trust, but this is where I think it's important. And I think the other thing that I haven't talked about yet, and maybe this comes back to some previous discussions we've had, Ian, but I think there's also trust for the person. So us in the Synergist and what we're trying to do to build synergy, there's actually a lot of thoughtfulness that comes into the way that we are trying to work. And I guess trust in ourselves. And it requires a lot to get these kind of conversations going and thinking about how to enable these different kinds of perspectives to come together. And we actually invest quite a lot of effort into supporting the growth of the people, the synergists, the people working within our organization to be able to do this. And we're trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah, you're describing lots of attributes of what I would call the dispositional factors that will enable a system or a change or an organization to thrive. This is complexity stuff now, where you're focused on relationships between things. It goes back to your expert network group. Bringing together disparate people that have similar shared intentions, values, preparedness to engage. I think there's actually another important attribute is that willingness to respectfully challenge. You actually want a degree of divergence. In complexity, you don't want everybody to be aligned, fully in agreement, all on the same page. If it truly is a complex system and everybody's in agreement, that's a cause for concern. My next question will be, did we end up with groupthink here? Surely somebody has a different concern, or surely somebody has seen something different here. And often when we're looking to do some sort of strategic intervention in complex systems, we're really looking for those differences, for those counterfactuals, for those multiple ways we could explore this. If everybody's settled on only one way to go, then it's probably not complex at all.
I think that's right.
I'm just sort of thinking on the fly here. There's another word that you didn't use that I want to throw in there in addition to trust, and this is about relationships. And you said the words, they need to defend the project and the idea. You don't want them to be undermining it or white-anting it, my words now. And I think really what this boils down to is the importance in a synergistic relationship where you're working with relationships and it's big change, societal change. I think there needs to be a degree of loyalty. Loyalty is that attribute where, you stick with people, you're not going to undermine them, you're going to work to their shared interest, you're not just going to sell them out. I don't know, my word. What do you think of loyalty in this mix of trust and network?
I think you're absolutely right. I think loyalty is really important. I was just thinking when you were speaking, and I was thinking, okay, what does this really mean? I think the funny thing about loyalty is that it is both something that is almost a prerequisite to participate. Like, we wouldn't want someone who's obviously disloyal. I think it would be difficult to create that space for them to participate. But I do think that the loyalty that we witness is something that is earned. I think the people who participate in the collaboration and they see what it's like, and they all kind of have their skin in the game somewhat, because there's a lot of sweat equity, let's say, that goes into it. It's not us when we have a collaborative program, we're not creating it for these people. I mean, of course, we put a lot of energy into it. We work really hard, but it's really the people around us bring the expertise, or, they're the ones I have calls with them literally where we're saying, okay, let's talk it through together. How could it be? What about this? Like, they build it together with us. And I think having gone through that experience, it creates this loyalty. So it's really, what I wanted to say was that it's not something we take for granted. It is something that results. And so maybe what I was saying before wasn't entirely correct. Like, they need to defend the project and idea. I'd like to think that they would do that, but it's more that this is what comes from the discussions we have. And yes, the willingness to respectfully challenge the idea, I think, is important. I think it's, for me, a natural result of having, when you have the right kind of group together. And, sometimes I have to do that. I actually think, okay, who is missing? What would be a kind of surprising addition to this group? And maybe we can even do that more. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love this. I love this conversation. I like the way you just said, this is a natural result. I think this is a bit like the trust, and it's a bit like this term psychological safety. People deliberately say, right, okay, everybody, we're now going to operate with psychological safety. But it's not earned. It's not a
Doesn't work
natural
that well.
result of just saying, let's
No.
just go and have psychological safety, right? It's the natural result of creating the right conditions for a team to thrive. And that's really what you're saying here. When we get the conditions right, we all have skin in the game. We've got these shared intentions, enough shared values. We respect we're all bought into the particular issue. We value relationships. Then these are some of the attributes of the synergistic system that we can create. And the natural result is that we get trust, we get loyalty, and actually you're probably going to get results and this idea of the societal change that you're looking for.
That's right. I think you've captured it really well.
Societal change then. I mean, you don't get much bigger than that. What's this thing about societal change? What do you mean by that? And how does, particularly around health, what are we looking to do? And how is it at such a scale?
For me, it's really about making the world a better place. And so we try to identify opportunities where we see people converging around some kind of topic, an issue that needs to be solved because it's important for them. We actually don't, this is actually not true. Now we're doing a little bit more of this, but in the past, we were kind of waiting for people to come, and people would come to us with an issue that they wish to solve, and then we would support them. So an example would be, and this is one of the biggest programs we have today, is around patient engagement. So this is, how can you engage the patient better in health more broadly, but specifically it could be like how you develop medicines, how you care for them. We talk about patient centricity a lot. And this is, we consider to be a societal issue because the issue or the opportunity, the other way to have a look at it, is that this is something that could be, that we think is the right way to go. And we'd like to see it much more widely available, widely accepted in the world. And we talk about system change because we also believe that these kinds of changes are something that require many moving parts, and these systems are complex. So it's not even just about involving the different kinds of people out there, so patient groups and healthcare providers and regulators, but imagine all the different kinds of mechanisms that you have to change. Even just taking research and development, you could have a look at it from even defining, what kind of products to develop. There's, how do you involve the patient in that? There's the actual recruiting of patients, that whole piece, the actual experimentation phase, and then afterwards as well. There are so many different things that go into it. And this is where we talk about, societal issues and looking at it from a system angle.
One of the things I'm really interested in at the moment is change in complex systems and working at different levels within the system itself. In complex systems, we talk about fractals. There's often a pattern, something that happens at a very low level. It can be an individual. It could be an individual way of thinking or making a decision that can be manifest in a team, in a division, in an organization, a part of a system, or in a societal embodiment. This could be attitudes. It can be all sorts of biases. And often we see that there is this, it's the same pattern, but with a different type of expression. So going to some of the societal interventions you mentioned, patients, healthcare providers, regulators, if you think about the smallest level of change, the lowest level of granularity it's called, what are some of the small scale things? And then how do you, what are examples as you go up?
First of all, I love the metaphor of something being practical. I've got this image of a Romanesco broccoli in my head right now. So I love the beauty of it. I like it a lot because I think you're absolutely right. I think, of course, we say these big words like system change, we need to change the system. But at the end of the day, I think the actual way that you deliver on the change is happening at the local level, at the community level. And this is something that I haven't mentioned before, but I think partnering with communities and the people who would be almost the beneficiaries of the change is something that's really important for us. one of the things that we have discovered, and we learned a lot along the way, I think I might have mentioned before that I am leading a program around personalized healthcare. And so in this project, what we're trying to do is to improve access to these kinds of, very innovative solutions, often very expensive, by understanding what are the kinds of barriers to access. And it could be anything from, helping the patient to know what kind of questions they should be asking with their healthcare provider. It's to help the pathologist who's actually doing the test and running the test in lab. It's keeping up with medical progress is a real challenge. And now you have all these kinds of future digital AI pathologies and how to handle that. And one of the things that we have been discovering in this project, and we've really been figuring out with the partners as we go, is how to make sure that we are having a local impact. And so one of the things that we did in this program at the beginning was we said, okay, well, we have this global community. We have literally representatives from different stakeholder groups in different countries. And we were quite happy. I think it was working well. Like we had people coming together in discussions. We were saying, okay, well, we see an issue here when it comes to the test that the patient receives, this is an issue here. And we figured it out, and we were trying to develop kind of locally adaptable resources based on all these kinds of insights. And that was working well. But then I think as a group, we reflected and we realized that we also wanted to have local impact. And so now what we're trying to do is to take some of the insights we have developed and to test them locally. But even that wasn't enough. And I think now what we're realizing is that it's really important to also have these discussions at the local and community level, because perhaps there are things that they are witnessing, but also developing as a solution that could then be fed up to the global level. So it's this kind of zooming out and in constantly of the overall view of this Romanesco broccoli and like the tiny fractal version of it that I think is really important. And what's important is recognizing that, but to enable the sharing between the two as well. And like the fractal pieces in this project, it's not always the same. So what we're trying to do is to say, okay, when it comes to this kind of issue in this kind of health system, this is typically the kind of experience that is had. And that might be slightly different in, I don't know, a place like Tasmania, for example, because of the local variations that exist. So yeah, in terms of fractal systems, that's the way that I am kind of making sense of the world.
Mm. Yeah, broccoli is such a good example, hey? I really like this way that you're thinking. And we've done a little bit of work recently on thinking about sophisticated health intelligence and evaluation. So this is getting away from a simple hypothesis, cause and effect. It could involve a random controlled trial, but much more through a systems lens. We think about things like voices, narratives, stories. In particular, the voice of lived experience, the people who are part of your beneficiary, if you like, and using those early on to tell us about systems and barriers, using them as lead indicators long before we get locked into spending billions of dollars on an intervention, and what we call privileging the voice of lived experience early as those sentinels of the system change, the societal change. Are we going the right way? Are we going the wrong way? What did the voices tell us? And we can also look at hard data, cold data, and in fact, it's sometimes called the synergy, if you like, or the bringing together of warm data and cold data. Warm data being the stories, the narratives about the system itself. So I like what you were saying there about how you're starting to look at all these different parts of the individuals, the locals, the community in this societal package. Just thinking about these types of systems, there's often not a single point, often a point that gets our attention because we think it's going to have the most leverage. It could be individuals. It could be a part of a community. It could be family. It could be through sporting clubs. It could be through community groups. It could be through some sort of regional thing or some sort of socio-demographic identity, or it could be at a particular part of a health system. In some of the work that you're doing, have you ever had an aha moment when you think, oh, that's the place we're going to get the best bang for our buck? If we go there, we think we'll get the biggest amount of societal change. Have you ever thought about it that way?
All the time. I think this is always what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out, okay, where is it that I often say, like, where is it that we can dig? What's the kind of shortcut to societal change, system change? It's a question I have to say I ask myself all the time. And in a previous discussion, we were talking about scanning the horizon, and I think the way that we are seeking to do that can also change also as we better understand the environment and how successful we are to make change happen. I think this example that I was just giving with the broccoli is one way of describing that, because of course at the beginning we thought that the way that we would make system change happen is to have these kinds of a global understanding of issues, and then we were learning that actually the local situation is really different, and having that adaptability to the local situation is important. And so the way that we're thinking about it in this project is rather than us as a collaborative organization trying to make the local change happen, what we're trying to do is we've shifted the mindset, and now we're trying to say, okay, well, can we figure out the kind of ingredients that there might be and the potential paths that people may need to follow locally, and then equipping more local champions with what they need in terms of knowledge, but also the support network for them to be able to make the change happen where they are, because they are the ones who know the local system the best. And in terms of support network, we are doing a lot of the kind of peer-to-peer support. We love this idea in this program around a SWAT team, so if someone wants to do something locally, that they can tap into a global community of experts who, for example, someone who might have advocated for the same kind of change where they are, or maybe a healthcare provider who can help a local group of pathologists make a shift towards a different kind of level of doing testing than hasn't been done before. So yeah, that's kind of the way that I look at that.
Yeah, it sort of brought us back a little bit as well to this idea that you began with of your early work as facilitating an expert network group, and you talked about supply chain and linking in FedEx to vaccines and the novelty that generates. I wonder if it's time to go even further. And there's this metaphor. It's described as a literal story of a board meeting where somebody says, "Hey, let's order pizza," and they get pizza, and the pizza boy comes and says, "Here's your pizza," and they say, "Come into the meeting. We want to ask you some questions." The pizza boy looks entirely rattled, but the point is that you're bringing somebody in who has absolutely nothing to do with that context, and you're looking for some spark or something that's so diverse that it could trigger a cascade of differently. Have you ever done that with your expert network group? You've got somebody, they wonder what on earth they're doing there, and they come up with an idea, and you go, "Woohoo, look at that."
It's something that I like to think I'm trying to do all the time, but really, when I think about it more recently, I feel like despite being multi-stakeholder in terms of approach, and a lot of people feeling that in itself is an innovation, I really do think that we can be more aggressively going out into the kind of long tail of expertise. And I love this idea of, I'm not quite sure who would be the pizza boy, but surprising connections. One of the topics that we're kind of into right now, and this is something new for us, that we when we see that there is change happening, and this is in the case actually of what we call sustainable health and well-being, or the intersection between climate change and health, and how, in short, we see that health can be part of the solution for climate change. Rather than waiting for a group of people to come together and kind of self-declare that they wish to do something on that topic, we've been going out to try to understand a little bit more how people look at this topic and being a bit more proactive, because we see that there is a societal need. And in that experience, what we have been doing is we have been actually curating and going out, and I actually work with a kind of headhunter who used to work with me at this first company I worked at. And I sat down with her and I said, okay, well, I can kind of imagine, of course, you have like the climate change expert and you have health system expert, but what else? What if we go to insurance companies? Like I can imagine that insurance companies care about, extreme weather events. So I've now learned that health insurance is a completely different thing, but we went out and I spoke to a couple of people more from the development insurance background. It was really interesting speaking with them because on their side, they were starting to do some exploration and they have no connection with health. So they actually don't know how to do it. And they were really happy that we had reached out because they want to speak with more kind of what they consider to be health sector stakeholders. And then the other group that has been quite interesting, and we're still quite early on with that, is with the investment community. So this is coming back to this world that I used to know. This is quite interesting. Actually, I spent the weekend, I was looking at some investments and how, I believe in my work. So I care about ESG reporting and how can they be more responsible. And I believe that there is so much that the financial industry can do. I mean, there's so many collectively, the kind of pressure that they can exert, I think is huge. And involving that kind of voice is also something that is somewhat surprising. Like you don't typically think about finance, I think, when it comes to health or climate. But that's another example of a kind of stakeholder group that's a bit more of a surprising connection potentially. And then, of course, you can look at other kinds of industries out there, like, I don't know, consumer goods. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like anyone, in the case of this topic, it's like who would care about this? If it's about the well-being of people, I think there are many different kinds of organizations or groups that would make sense.
Yeah, I was just scribbling away, making notes then as you were talking. You were stimulating some ideas and, we talked about, the investment person, the actuary, these people calculate risk. And then I was starting to think, you use this gorgeous term, the long tail of expertise. And for me, I was intrigued by the prospect of bringing in an artist. And then I went to another metaphor, which is a metaphor we use a lot around culture change, which is we talk about cultivating culture. This metaphor that we're looking to nurture that we want more of and prune away or put boundaries in place for that we don't want. And I just, as you were talking, I wrote down, I've got to run an intervention on strategy and get in a landscape gardener. Just somebody way out on that long tail to give a perspective on how do you cultivate an environment to have more of what you want and less of what you don't. And I think that just working with that metaphor could be really good fun, exploring that long tail of expertise.
I love that a lot. And I think you're really onto something in terms of cultivating an environment, because of course there are many ways to do that. And we don't need to be so strict, like, okay, health has to be this sector. And we can be quite creative with that. And I love art. I considered myself an artist at the beginning, and I find a lot of this work, it's a creative work, actually, when you're trying to think of the different kinds of connections you can make. But even putting that aside, I think, yes, there's so much more you can do with art and culture. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to change systems, I think that can be a really powerful tool in terms of helping to increase awareness. And we actually have dabbled in this a little bit. So last year we went to a conference and we're trying to get some momentum going around this topic of women-centered care and research and development. So this is not like women's health in the sense of reproductive health, but more like how can you be more looking at sex and gender in terms of delivering the most appropriate care to women. And we worked with an artist, and we actually did this kind of immersive thing where it was two artists that we work with, French artists. We went through some old materials, interviews, and we were trying to find kind of like visual ways to represent it, using art, using quotes. And we created this kind of giant poster that we put out in this hallway at this conference. And I think that can be really powerful as well, to do that kind of thing. And imagine scaling that out beyond the small conference where we can reach only a few hundred people. I think there's really so much you can do. I find that really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I really like that idea of bringing the art in, using it to think differently. And so much is contained within the metaphors that we use. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone from networks and relationships and complexity theory. We've gone on to trust, shared intentions. We've touched on loyalty. We've touched on the importance of skin in the game, supporting these projects. We've gone down to fractals and broccoli and down to the importance of individuals and voices, all in the context of synergy and systems and societal change and some of your projects like women-centered care. You said that you've worked on a range of projects. From health is one of the areas that you're particularly passionate about now, but you've worked on all sorts of things. Just going right up now to a really big and tough question, and I've given you no warning for this, and I apologize. If there was something you could direct people's attention to in the world, so this is not just a societal problem, but a society of societies, if you like. It's a big global. If you could direct people's attention to anything, what would it be?
I think I have young children, and I'm often thinking, what's the world I would love to leave for them? I think I will actually come back to what we had talked about at the beginning of the discussion around trust and values, and how I said that for me, trust was not just about the predictability of how that person might behave, or the kind of the values they bring into that relationship. And if you're asking me, like, what is the thing that I would want my children to hold on to, I think that is something that is really important for me. And I like to think that people may cherish that more in the future, given some other things that are happening right now. I think it's really important to kind of behave in the way that you wish to be exemplary to other people. And I think there are lots of different kinds of things that come into that. And I think not so far away from that is to, it sounds really cheesy, but to work in a way to make the world a better place. I mean, I think if everyone were to work thoughtfully and to make it happen. I've read a fantastic book recently following a recommendation from a friend called The Future We Choose by Cristina Figueres. It's about climate change, and it's all about intentionality. And it's saying, this is an issue, but rather than acting as though it is just fate and we just have to kind of give up, if each of us were to make some certain changes, like it's not impossible. Like we can make changes collectively. And I think that's at the end of the day what this is all about. It's about saying these challenges, societal issues that seem so hard and so complex, if we are to come together and each pitch in and think about things together, and more than just about the surprising collections, but it's just each of us putting our little piece in and working with attention, I do think that we can make these. I mean, we do it because we believe it can happen. Like, I really believe these changes can happen. So yeah, I don't know how clear that is, but if there is, a gift I would give to my children, a message I would give to them, which I guess is the same thing, and that is what I would share.
That's a great example. And that's both synergistic, it's generative, and it's societal, and it's at that nice level of influence where everybody can make small changes, and then collectively they amplify into big societal changes. That's a fantastic place to leave. So what's next for you, either at work or elsewhere in your life? What's the next step?
So a personal passion of mine is this kind of environment, climate change kind of area. So I would love, this is what I'm trying to do right now, is to get a program off the ground around that. And not so far away from that is this kind of area around food systems as well, and food security, and the link between all that and well-being and health. So that for me really is the next step. And I know at the Synergist, of course, we're keen to reach the goals that we have for the various programs, but I think being able to show that we have really a model that can work, and to be able to show the world, what they can do. Imagine if we scaled this to many times its size. That would just be amazing. So that's what I would love to see.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Salience podcast. Please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Frontline Mind newsletter by visiting our website at frontlinemind.com. Have you got a topic you would like some more salience on? Send us a message on LinkedIn or email team@frontlinemind.com.